Since Haxan came out in 1922, witches have been a constant presence in pop culture and spent decades scaring audiences in various shapes and sizes. Horror films have long used witches in their arsenal of terrifying tools that have allowed them to frequent the genre so often. The different ways they've been used over the years is extraordinary and makes for an incredibly varied history in film. I'm Jess from What Culture, and here are the 10 scariest witches in horror movies. Number 10. Grand High Witch, The Witches. Not a typical horror film, but just as horrifying for children and adults alike is this adaptation from the work of Roald Dahl. Centered around a boy who discovers a convention of witches who are plotting to turn the world's population of children into mice, the storytelling here is relatively kid-friendly. The appearance of the maniacal and cackling witches isn't quite as welcoming, however, as the execution of their reveal is done in terrifying fashion. The Grand High Witch herself is played by the suitably regal Angelica Houston, who fully embraces the cruel depravity of the character in every way. Being able to disguise themselves as ordinary-looking humans, the film builds up to the transformation scene, which I still can't get out of my memory. As we see them remove their gloves to reveal their long pronged claws, or peel back their skin to unveil their hideous visage, it's the kind of sequence that'd be burned into the mind of any adult, let alone the children like me it was marketed towards. Number 9. The Ratch, The Wretched. Although the film itself is somewhat of a cliche horror movie with relatively weak performances from its cast, the practical effects used to create the Ratch in The Wretched make for an incredibly unsettling experience. A 1,000-year-old witch that lives in the skin of other humans and animals, this 2019 picture enjoys playing with the idea that anybody can be the Wretch, as our protagonist doesn't know who to trust. The longer she stays in one body, the more the body begins to decay and become misshapen. This is where the brilliant practical effects come in, and even more so when the Wretch has to climb out of the human it's wearing. An added element of the Wretch's scary potential is that she has the power to make you forget your loved ones after she makes them disappear. This leaves the young children she kidnaps to fear for their lives while the Wretch devours them, whereas the children's family and friends don't even remember they exist, which is a terrifying thought. Number 8. Haggus, Pumpkinhead. Cult horror Pumpkinhead may be more remembered for the titular demon rather than the witch who can summon it, but Haggus is just as scary as the creature she can bring to life. A decrepit old crone, Haggus lives on the outskirts of a rural community who revere and avoid her at all costs. After Ed Harley's son is killed in an accident caused by a group of city teenagers, he seeks out Haggus in the hope she can perhaps bring the little boy back to life. She can't help in this regard, but she can bring back the monstrous Pumpkinhead, who in truth looks a little more extraterrestrial than demonic, to murder those responsible for his son's death. Appearing ancient with her wire-like hair and deep southern drawl, Haggus is a memorable addition to the film, who can instill more fear from her old cabin encased in red light than the slimy smirking monster the film is known for. Number 7. Meg Mucklebones, Legend. Short but sweet, this witch made a big impact with little screen time in the fantasy thriller Legend from Ridley Scott. The film is renowned for its prosthetic work on Tim Curry's horned Lord of Darkness, but it's Meg Mucklebones who's the most terrifying creature in the film. Not a witch in the conventional sense, Meg has no magical abilities, but her swamp hag appearance allows her to easily qualify as a witch. Jack and his friends are attempting to cross a mysterious marsh when Meg emerges from the depths to eat Tom Cruise's character. In an attempt to save his own life, Jack attempts to flatter the witch by complimenting Meg on her apparently beautiful looks. Sure, slimy and repulsive, Meg graciously accepts the flirtations, before attempting to devour this charmer. For her troubles, her head is promptly removed by Jack's sword. It's a brief scene, but certainly a memorable one that shows off an inventively designed creature. Number 6. The Witch, Gretel and Hansel. Gretel and Hansel was an under-the-radar release with gorgeous cinematography and big ideas that it couldn't quite conclude in a satisfying way. One positive that cannot be denied though is Alice Krieger's take of the classic Grimm Brothers witch. Based on the fairy tale, Gretel and Hansel are two siblings who find themselves in the house of a witch who secretly eats children. You know the one. The film builds up the tension slowly and effectively as the audience anticipates the worst. Krieger is outstanding as the witch, who gives each one of her stares a kind of vacant knowingness, as if she's a hollow shell. Each of her fingers are a charcoal black up to just before the knuckles, which she uses to gently caress the heads and faces of the two siblings. She never raises her voice, and the character speaks with a form of deliberate seduction that'll make the hairs stand up on the back of your neck. There are no practical effects used for her appearance, nor is there an overuse of magic in the film. Instead, it's all down to Krieger's performance striking fear, and she's easily the best thing in a film that could have been so much better. Number 5. Helena Marcos, Susperia. Dario Argento's cult classic Susperia tells the story of a coven of witches running a ballet academy who feed off their prospective students. Each of the brutal murders that befalls the aspiring dancers is suitably disturbing, but it's the leader of the witches, Helena Marcos, who'll make your skin crawl the most. The other witches draw power from Helena and are bound to her, which means they safeguard her for most of the film. In one scene, the witches have to move Marcos to sleep in the dance studio with the other students, due to a maggot infestation in the upper rooms. Helena is concealed behind a curtain, but her throaty and pained breathing provides a creepy image as we don't yet know her appearance. In the film's climax, when she's revealed to us, we see her hag-like and rotten visage as she looks almost moldy in her bed. Her distinguished and crazed voice only adds to the sense of anguish our protagonist feels in that moment. Although Luca Guadagnino's remake doesn't quite live up to the original, it deserves a shout out for its updated use of practical effects that add to Helena's terror. Number 4. Jane Doe, The Autopsy of Jane Doe. An unconventional take on a witch is The Autopsy of Jane Doe, which fittingly has the witch be a corpse from the outset. The film takes place as two coroners who happen to be father and son go through the motions of an autopsy of an unidentified woman. On the outside, there isn't a scratch on her, but when they open her up, she's filled with interior damage and a good deal of anomalous discoveries. The film's at its strongest when they're trying to work out the mystery behind what's happened to the cadaver. The more the coroners delve into Jane Doe's body, the more unexplainable the situation becomes. They find her skin has a layer of marked flesh, a flower deep inside her, and undigested parchment with writing on it from her stomach. Jane Doe acts as a puzzle box for the narrative to work through. Just a quick FYI, I am about to spoil the ending, so switch off now if you don't want to know what happens. But the revelation that she was falsely accused of being a witch during the Salem witch trials and the torturous ritual she was put through is what resulted in her becoming a witch is tragic. The Autopsy of Jane Doe is a surprisingly clever horror film that succeeds in bringing the scares. Number 3. The Blair Witch. The Blair Witch Project. Less is more with this notorious low-budget found footage film. The Blair Witch Project follows 3 student filmmakers who chose to make a documentary in the Burkittsville woods about the infamous Blair Witch. As they become progressively lost in the woods, strange stones, effigies, and noises seem to follow them around as the Blair Witch stalks them at night. Made on a shoestring budget, the Blair Witch herself is never shown on camera. Instead, priority is given to authenticity, as the film became a huge success due to its viral marketing campaign that convinced thousands of people, including teenage me, that what they were seeing was an actual documentary. The actors were encouraged to stay out of the public eye to add credence to the film's claims that they are quote-unquote missing, and nothing in the film can be obviously identified as something fake or manufactured. The Blair Witch has no interest in showing off a creative-looking witch or experimenting with dynamic visuals. Instead, the movie's an emotional experience, designed for you to suspend your disbelief completely and take in the scares that the characters are feeling. Number 2. Minnie and Roman Castevet, Rosemary's Baby. Minnie and Roman Castevet are not trying to be scary, quite the opposite in fact. When Rosemary and her husband Guy move into an apartment, the Castevets try to make them feel welcome and insert themselves into the young couple's lives. Seeming intrusive but otherwise harmless, the Castevets grow closer and more involved with Rosemary and Guy to an uncomfortable degree. After Minnie drugs Rosemary, she has a lucid memory of the Castevets along with Guy and others naked in her bedroom. They calmly watch as Satan rapes Rosemary and impregnates her with the Antichrist. The Castevets are members of the satanic coven that can make dreams come true for those that help in bringing the son of Lucifer to Earth. Their kind and sociable demeanor adds to their horror, as they project this passive insincerity into everything they do. Rosemary's Baby is an exercise in paranoia, and as the Castevets and Guy continue to gaslight Rosemary and make her feel like she's losing her mind, the film adds an element of social horror that's both relatable and believable. This makes Minnie and Roman figures that you can imagine in the real world, which makes them just as scary as the magic they perform. Number 1. The Witch of the Woods, The Witch. Robert Eggers' modern masterpiece, The Witch, is not as focused on the titular magical villain as you might expect. A religious family in the 1600s lives on the edge of the woods in New England. Their lives are slowly torn apart as they're targeted by a nearby witch, leading them to question each other and slowly slipping into madness. The Witch of the Woods herself only appears in a handful of scenes, but those moments are used to great effect. First, the young baby of the family is stolen by her. We see her grind his bones and mash him into a red paste, which she then proceeds to rub onto her naked body. It's completely unsettling and will make your skin crawl. Her torment of the family is also not entirely vindictive, as she needs them for her own selfish spells. She treats them like cattle, which makes it all the more disturbing. The witch manages to be a horrifying experience while only showing its antagonist a couple of times. By instead focusing on the ongoing trauma and paranoia of the family, we can see just how scary an unseen enemy like the Witch of the Woods can be.